Here at Behind the Mask, we acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original storytellers and custodians of the land on which we live and meet today. Behind the Mask is a podcast about sharing authentic stories. And in continuing that legacy of storytelling, we acknowledge that we're honouring and celebrating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' traditions, customs and stories. And we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. With International Women's Day fast approaching, the Western Bulldogs Community Foundation are celebrating a week of women, and it's a joy to be able to take the show on the road for the first time to their home base here at one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Mission Whitten Oval. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Western Bulldogs senior coaches Tam Hyatt and Luke Beveridge to go behind the mask of gender equity and allyship from men in this, our beloved game of Aussie rules footy. Welcome to the Behind the Mask podcast, Tam and Bevo.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for having us, Josh.
I'm so looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to it for a while. So I'm going to start with this. I know you guys love people. You love building and fostering relationships. You love developing young people, especially. And it's a huge part of why you coach and why you lead. And when I think of leadership, for me, 2 words that really spring to mind are authenticity and vulnerability. Yeah, the courage to be fully you in all your ways, to share your bliss and indeed your blisters is a part of what connects us. So I want to know, as you ride through the rigours and undulations of a career in coaching, how do you go about leading with those 2 words, authenticity and vulnerability?
Oh, well, I'm happy to kick it off, Bevo. For me, it's about having a really strong self-awareness, understanding what my strengths and weaknesses are, and then with the group, filtering that through the group, so being able to have shared or sharing feelings, thoughts, and more importantly, probably experiences with the team. That's how I do it. That's how I
Beautiful.
probably... Yeah,
So
self-awareness is the key for me.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot on this show, just the ability to self-reflect, to go inward, to tap into the parts of yourself that you know you might need to work on, which might be your blisters, but also about sharing the parts of you that, you know, light a spark within you, which is your bliss. And it does come down to self-awareness. What about for you, Bevo? Those 2 words.
Yeah, they're pretty powerful words. I think we all love that word, authenticity, don't we?
Buzzword.
Being original and vulnerability these days is probably a little bit easier than what it used to be, showing your emotions. I've been talking recently to the playing group more than anyone else about this concept of servant leadership, and you know, primarily in its simple description and definition, servant leadership is basically putting others' interests before your own. And I think if you do that, you know, you become pretty vulnerable, and it's this split personality of the people who are in front of you. It's the staff member or the performer or the artist, whoever's being paid to do what they do, but then it's the other part, which is the person, you know, which is where you leave yourself really vulnerable if you really get out of your comfort zone and allow yourself to get to know them a little bit, because then the harder conversations become more difficult because you're invested emotionally. And so I don't shy away from that. I think it's critical and important for sustainability in your relationships with your people. And you know, Rachel Robertson, in her book, Respect Trumps Harmony, she's got a really simple description of what leadership is. She says it's not a title, it's a string of behaviours, and essentially that's what it is. And so if we're ourselves and our people, you know, and our players can bank on consistency of behaviour, that's a really strong platform to work from. So I think it's not it's not new, so it's not really authentic, but if that's who you are, then don't be afraid, to let it unfold that way. And I think I've always been okay with just being myself. So that's how I roll.
Yeah. Do you have those conversations with players who you feel like maybe are struggling for both of you, struggling to sort of share authentically, or you go, I see that there's a big fat mask cooking here. I would love to impart some wisdom on you to help you with authenticity. And that is going to ask you to be courageously vulnerable. And just on vulnerability, I do want to say that I know that you guys create a safe space for vulnerability, because I think vulnerability is really dangerous. If it's not safe, it can be really weaponized. Your vulnerabilities can be really weaponized against you if you don't feel like you're in a safe space.
Yep.
So yeah, how do you go about speaking to, maybe it's a leadership group, or maybe it's just an individual, a player going, I feel like there's an authentic self waiting to awaken here, but I can see that there's stuff in the way.
Yeah, it probably starts with that, showing that genuine care.
Yeah.
And being able to be open and honest with that communication piece. And that's a work in progress, I think, is people are more open and vulnerable in different ways. So first and foremost, it's understanding the person. And then for me, it's probably consistency as well, being consistent with, as Bevo said, those behaviours that, you're wanting from others. That's probably something that I'm still working on. 12 months into the job at the moment, with a new group, so you're still building that trust and connecting with those relationships that enables those people to break down that mask, and you can actually delve a little bit deeper.
Beautiful. Bev?
Yeah, I think, and I suppose you would have noticed, Tam, too, with your resources, we're quite fortunate. It's not just us, and that safe workplace, you lean on and rely on so many other people to create it, to foster it, to maintain it, to continue to grow it. And so there's always little conversation forums and where you can talk about life and sort of abstract things, and that's all going to be okay, because it can't always be about football, and quite commonly it isn't, And little example today, Anthony Scott bowls into the coaches' quarters, and he's printed out this what he thought was factual, that if and there was a graph involved, and goodwill hunting, mathematical equations, and if the probability that if there was 23 people in a room that didn't know each other, the probability that two of them would have the same date of birth, not the same year, just say two people born on the 22nd of April, it's 50%, right? 23 people. And he's going, yeah, how's this? It's 50%. And he's got it printed out. And I said, Scotty, that is bullshit. He goes, it's not, it's fact. Have a look at this. And he brings over the printed out Wikipedia sheet, and it clearly states that it's a paradox. It's not, I said, it's a paradox, Anthony. You're reading the detail. It's fact. It's all there, right? So I didn't mean to challenge him too hard on it, but he knew he hadn't had a win. And so, because I used to work in different government agencies, he comes in later on, Bevo, I've got a tax question for you. And he asked me this obscure question about primary producers and how 50% of their land needs to be agriculture, and if you put a homestead on it and rent it out as commercial real estate, do you still minimise your stamp duty? This is his win, because he knows I can't answer it. So it's like one each. And all our coaches and all our people, I think, establish that kind of environment where you can have that conversation about something that is totally unrelated to the game.
Great.
But I think also we have the opportunity of providing, it's feedback on steroids. What we do is just, it's in your face every week, how are you going to manage it? And so making sure when you're talking to individuals about something that they probably need to do a little bit better, it's take that away in isolation and have the right language, the right tone, set the plan, work in partnership, look to the next week, rather than putting that up in lights. You do need to put things up in lights in front of the group and the lines, but when it's a bit confronting, you do it the right way. So they know they turn up, and where the feedback is sort of room for improvement, it's making sure that they're not exposed too much to the uncertainty and even the scrutiny or ridicule in a bigger room with a lot of people in it. So, and that hasn't always been done right across the whole, competition in any code. So that's an ongoing challenge, but that is a big work on as far as making sure that the players do feel safe.
Yeah. How do you guys go about receiving your criticism?
I think pretty good.
Depends who from, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a sign of vulnerability.
Yeah,
is if you can, you've got to model that behaviour. So if you're willing to, and it comes down to the relationship, so that value piece. So if you're valuing the relationship that you have with the individual or the group, it could be a coach, a staff member, or a player, you take it on board really well because it's coming from a good place. But it all starts with that relationship and that mutual respect and trust. I think my wife would probably say otherwise, but it's ongoing. There's probably bits that you don't, and they're a work in progress. But majority of it, I think that if you've built a foundation of that trust and respect.
Tell me about a time when you went, you know what, I didn't deal with that criticism well.
How far back do you want me to
go whether it's when you were playing golf as a coach.
No, I could probably go recently. You can get quite defensive, potentially because you're taking it the wrong way. The end of every year, every season, I've just experienced my first one. You get the player feedback surveys. That's an interesting piece when you're doing your review. So you've got to understand the context that it's put in and take feelings into account. Probably some of it, maybe you overlook the feeling piece, and that's something that, I probably need to work on a little bit.
Yeah, so to separate what you do and being evaluated on what you do rather than on who you are.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that's, new. When you're in a new environment, that's something that you're still working on. Is because getting to know people is ongoing, and what we're dealing with is we have list changes. So, you're forever trying to build that relationship with someone new. Circumstances change in people's lives and potentially relationships, and so then you're working out new ways to get to know them.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about the women's game, and we'll talk to it a lot. But I sort of wanted to start with, the game is still in its infancy.
Yep.
Or relative infancy, and there's often some pretty vile, harsh, derogatory behind-the-scenes comments about the quality of the game, about individuals in it. I know we're talking about the round ball women's game, but recently Marty Sheargold's comments on Triple M were pretty disturbing. And for those who haven't heard it, he said, and I quote, "I'd rather hammer a nail through the head of my penis than watch that. Got any men's sport?" And when I heard that, I was so disturbed by that we're in 2025 and we're still hearing that in mainstream media. But there are men out there, and probably some women too, who go, that's funny, or that's cool, or maybe that's just their truth, that's where they stand on it. But I want to know, why do you feel we still have that extremely sexist dialogue in mainstream? And what do you feel like we can do systemically to change the way we approach and even to positively elevate women's sport in general, but specifically AFLW? I know it's a long question.
Oof, that's a big one. It's interesting. Bevo and I were talking earlier. I think it stems from, what you've been brought up on, who you've been brought up by, and potentially those model behaviours that you're seeing. Now, I can only go on how I've been brought up, and probably the platforms that I choose to listen to or observe, and that's not my world.
You just don't engage in it.
No. But potentially, unless I'm hearing, the quote, that's not a platform that I'm listening to.
So you didn't hear it in the moment?
No. And probably because there's repeat behaviours from that individual that I choose not to listen to that platform. I guess for me, it's language is crucial and irrelevant of gender. I think across, whether you're in the boardroom, you're commentating, you're, having a corridor chat, I think that irrelevant of gender, it's what people say is quite powerful. Not potentially whether it's positive or negative. But I think it's, irrelevant of gender. I think the language really matters. So it's, who you choose to listen to. And for me, I've been brought up on, I'm one of 3 girls. My dad was probably a real champion of do what you believe in. He's got 3 girls. He wouldn't know any different about girls wanting to be part of sport or anything like that. So that's my normal. I understand that that's probably not society normal, potentially. But that's my normal. And I hope that, and I know that that's going to be my kids' normal as well, based on the behaviours that I model and also those professional and personal relationships of men in their life of what they model on to.
Yeah, so it speaks to parenthood and specifically with men. I think it's sort of asking them, what kind of father do you want to be?
Yeah, so I've probably only really answered one part of that question, but it's probably more around the modelling as far as the AFLW landscape goes. And
how can we positively elevate it?
And perception is everything. So for me, where the Bulldogs are celebrating 100 years, 10 of which women have had their own league. So we're still growing, we're still new. I'm pretty much a glass half full type of person. So rather than looking at what the critics are saying and public perception, I'm probably looking at the visibility that's been created by the Women's League, the increase of participation that's been created. You're looking at now Erin Phillips in the media. Would that have happened if the W League, hadn't got up? And then I look at our new draftees coming in who they'll be the first crop that have had exposure to just girls' sides from under 10s. So I probably look at it in a more positive of what it's actually enabling. And then, even the workforce and things like that. It's all public perception, different media critics. But I think sometimes we probably focus on the negative, and we've actually got to look at that anything new always has challenges, and it's there's been a whole lot of positive that's come out of the W League. Yeah,
and when there is darkness,
yeah,
the only thing that can illuminate it is light.
Yeah.
So that positivity, that light, if we can, we don't actually have stars in the sky. We don't see them without the darkness. So sometimes we need the balance of things to really illuminate what's wonderful in the game at the moment. Bev, how's your sort of perception towards the women game shifted, grown over the last decade?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've got to always be careful because I can say the right thing and it's the wrong thing sometimes. But and part of this is, with the allies aspect of where we're going is to call the Sheargold extreme prejudice, naivety in his comment. Like it's a stitch in time, and whether it's a moment of madness or he's lost his way, I don't know. But it's crazy to think that he could make those comments, and later on let himself down again. And when I say naivety, women's football, the round ball game, soccer in sometimes Australian terms, they term it the first golden age of women's football was back in like 100 years ago, 105 years, 1920. So at the end of the First World War, when men went to war and the women were working in munitions factories, but they were playing football. They were playing the round ball game in the UK. And back then there was about 38 million people, I think, who lived in England. But in 1920, 50,000 people went to watch a women's game of soccer in England, in London. 50,000 people, right? So because the men weren't playing. So you moved the men out of the way and the women were playing an attractive enough brand of football that 50,000 people went and watched. And then...
How good's that?
It's amazing. Like a lot of people don't realise, and this is the naivety of history, and when you go back and in Gladwell terms and revise your thoughts on what happened back then, well, it was a disgrace that the Football Association in the UK at the time, when the men came back from war, they made a rule that the women couldn't play on any grounds of any club that were within the association. And it was pretty much every club. So the women stopped playing football for 50 years. That rule was in place from 1920 to 1970. So if you think that the women back in 1920 could get 50,000 people to a game, and then we took 50 years off them, like if they ran the code in the genders parallel, what women's football would be like now in Europe. And now our Matildas, and how much they inspired the nation, quite recently, was amazing. But, that's the international game. There's intrigue around World Cups and the Olympics. Back then, I'm talking about in the 1920s, that was the domestic game in the UK. But so now where we are with our women's game is that we haven't got that history yet. And as Tam alluded to, it's 10 years in the AFL. And my sister, she would have been a very, very good player, but there weren't any girls' teams when she was a little girl. She ended up coaching a group of lads in the St Peter's under 14s, I think it was at the time. She was a bit of a pioneer, like some of, the Susan Albertis that have gone before us. And my mum was the secretary of that junior football club, Rosa. Kathy's my sister. So the girls, even if they wanted to play, they couldn't, because there weren't enough girls who maybe were enthusiastic about it then, or we didn't allow them to become enthusiastic about it. Now they are. Now in COVID times and just before it was the girls who reinvigorated our code at junior level. Like the boys had kind of, stopped playing a little bit.
Really?
And the passion and the drive to play the game at junior level across metropolitan and regional Victoria in particular drove a new enthusiasm towards our game. And it sparked again. And it was largely because of what the girls were doing and how keen they were on the game. So now, we need time. We need the generations to come through of young girls and young women for the game and the code with the women's game to continue to improve. But I think if you're looking at it from a return on investment point of view, the AFL, they think about broadcast and they think about gate. Now, it's a fact that at the moment, the women's game it doesn't draw anywhere near as much attention that the men's game currently does. But that's now. And if you think about it, in 1920, 50,000 people came through the gate in the UK, the ROI, the return on investment's got to be looked at from the point of view of the future, not now. Because we've got to incentivise the game so the girls have got that carrot. They want to keep playing. There's a future for them. We can't take that away. And so if that means we spend more on the women's game, if that means the investment is up to a significant degree and the losses might accumulate, well, it's all a means to an end because it will happen. And that's the way I view it. And because I really enjoy watching our women play the game. And I just mentioned to Josh and Tam earlier on, I was at Cataract Gorge this time last year when we played Hawthorn over there. And I was speaking to Michael about it as well. And so coincidentally, we've just come back. You know, you swim in the magnificent Olympic-sized swimming pool in the gorge. And last year, TISM were the headline act of a concert in the gorge. And fortunate enough to have a conversation with the lead singer and the lead guitarist on the plane. They're both from South Australia, passionate. One's an Adelaide supporter, one's a Port Adelaide supporter, passionate about the women's game. These guys in their late 60s, old rockers, probably never heard anything more obscure in my life. I just didn't see it coming, and it was a great conversation. But they love going to watch the girls and really expressed how passionate we were about their football club. So it was a little bit obscure that TISM would be in that space, but it was great. And they had a new sense of optimism about the game because of the level of improvement. And they noticed it because they've been following it for a fair period of time, and we're all noticing it.
Yeah.
But the prejudices are still there because whether it's your upbringing or whether it's someone has said something that you, like Scotty, you know, he's turned a mathematical equation and a paradox into fact. Because if you convince yourself in your own head that something is quacking and walking like a duck, but it's actually a penguin, then it's just crazy. So really enjoying the growth and the investment just needs to be really evident and look to the future from an ROI perspective.
Yeah. I think it speaks to patience and it speaks to expectations. And, you know, when I speak to some men in my age bracket who have some harsh things to say about it, I'm like, stop thinking what you're going to get out there is what you got out there on Anzac Day for a men's game or a prelim final for a men's game. Stop expecting it to be that. Bring your expectations down because it's not going to be that. It's going to be what is. See it as its own entity and fall in love with that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some extraordinary games. I remember the Hawthorn-Geelong game last year, women's game. I just thought it was extraordinary. But on the flip side, I did want to ask both of you, you know, you spoke to 100 years ago, the round ball game. The men's game's been going for over 100 years now, and it took 100 or so years to get to 18 clubs. Have we done the women a disservice by expanding to 18 clubs in the women's game so quickly?
Probably goes back to the original comment of, you know, what are we looking to achieve? Like, so ambitious potentially, but there's been lots of positive that comes of it. I think the patience piece is a really interesting one. It is a different game. I mean, we only have 16 players a side on the field, but we're still playing the same size ground. So I think the patience, potentially the challenges are that the resources and that what did you call it, Bevo? ROI?
Return on investment.
Return on investment.
Yeah.
Additional resources is going to probably assist with developing players quicker. Mm-hmm. But why? Yeah. Like that's, you know.
Also be patient. Yeah.
Who for? Who are we trying to fast track this for? A similar, you know, we've got our age bracket of a list of 30, we've got an 18-year-old and then we've got a 36-year-old. So they're coming in at very different, I guess, experiences of what they've had growing up. So,
and that 18-year-old's played all through their life.
Yeah.
And that 36-year-old might be a code switch.
Yeah. Well, she was netball, but chose that, wow, what an opportunity to play something that I wanted to but didn't have access to potentially at underage level. I think time is a really interesting one. We're all so quick with life, with everything. We want everything now. Like you look at the Gen Z, they want to know now, like why. And I think the patience piece is really interesting, is that it's trajectory in the right way. Just give it time.
And we talk a bit on this show about soulful behaviour.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the soul isn't a place that you can hurry to get to. And the soul in and of itself is slow and down. Yeah. So in order to get there, to become more soulful, to have a more soulful game, one that you really love intrinsically within your soul, you don't get there in a hurry. It's slow and down to get there. Let it take its time. So I think patience is a big one.
What we've done with the national women's competition is we're reverse engineering it, really.
Yeah.
And there's a strategic aspect of this, and it stems from what I said earlier around the girls' participation at junior level. There's, over the last probably 15 years, when you consider the competing codes in Australia, and soccer, the round ball game is one that's there, that is definitely at the junior levels in particular, competes with our Aussie rules game for participation. And so with the greenfields of metropolitan and regional Victoria, and when councils are considering what sporting fields to establish on these new estates and in these greenfields, well, who's playing what? There was a time when there might be one Aussie rules ground and 6 to 8 soccer pitches, because that's probably the ratio. Now, the girls breathed new life into the game. The boys followed suit. It started to grow again. Now when councils are asking themselves, what do we put down? They've got to put down football ovals because the girls are playing. We're hoping they're not dropped. They dropped off a little bit for a period after COVID, but we've got to continue to rejuvenate the participation rate. So from an AFL perspective, it's like, okay, how do we entice and incentivise the game? And part of it is, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And then so we've established the women's national competition really early, and now we're trying to, build but we've let the girls down with some of the, Tam, how many interchange rotations do you have?
75.
Is it 75? Yeah. 75, 5 on the bench, 16 on the field. Should be 18 on the field, and there probably should be one. It should still only be 4 on the bench, and there almost should be unlimited rotations. With the girls playing the minutes that they do, we've got to set them up to succeed. So there's things that we can do better from a rules and regulations perspective to help the game look better, and the feel for it for the girls and everyone who plays it, for it to be where they need it to be. We've got to see the AFL's perspective from a strategic point of view. We've got to do this because we are competing on a national basis for participation, and ultimately how that influences broadcast, gate, all that sort of stuff, and that's what we're doing.
Interesting that you spoke to have 18 on the field, whereas a lot of people said, have 16 or less to have the game more open. Would there be any other little adjustments? And I love that adjustment, by the way, Bev. Are there any other adjustments that you'd like to see to the women's game, little tweaks?
I'm big on 18 on a field.
I'm big on it too.
I think that the reasoning for 16 was to take away congestion, but you've got fatigue.
Yeah.
That straight
which
away,
creates more congestion.
Which creates more congestion.
And I'm with you on the unlimited rotations as well.
Yeah.
I'm still a big fan of the cyclone from the boundary umpire, just last touch.
Yeah, I like
last
last touch.
Yeah, I like last touch.
Yeah, between the arcs, last touch.
Yep,
is good.
I'm a big fan. I'd
Yeah.
like to see that a bit more of it. Hey, spoke about Marty Sheargold's comments, and we've looked at toxic masculinity on this show before. Had an episode with performer Rob Mills, who also was the author of a book putting on a show, Manhood, Mates and Mental Health. And he came on with a bloke called Ryder Jack, who works for Tomorrow Man, who go into schools and organisations, even jails, and talk to young boys about ways to shift their to shift their mindset to a more positive version of masculinity. Now, the word toxic masculinity is one that just gets branded out so much, and it has made a lot of men, especially white men, very defensive. You almost close your ears to it because it's so overused and it's actually not having its intended purpose. And really the spectrum of it, which the thing I'm not a big fan of for it, is that it's like white men are considered inherently toxic until they prove themselves otherwise. And so the spectrum is from toxic to not toxic, which isn't really something to aspire towards, just being not toxic. So we coined the phrase evolved man or mature man. And I'd love to know, what are the traits, attributes, what are the qualities that you would like to see in an evolved man? Maybe that speaks to your father or men in your life that you go, you know what, I see that's a really evolved man.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I hadn't heard of the phrase evolved man.
Because we coined it on an episode.
Yeah.
It hasn't hit Google yet, hasn't hit Wikipedia yet. Sorry, Scotty.
Yeah, so when you think about that, that evolve, that growth. So for me, it's having that respect, having someone who can challenge those bias and call out behaviours.
I love that, call out behaviour.
Yeah, so that's how I picture that growth, that evolve.
And calling out behaviour also speaks to courage.
Yeah. And that's being vulnerable as
Yep,
well,
that's being vulnerable.
being brave, and which all these words that we probably shouldn't have to use to challenge potential behaviours. But
I know I was in a WhatsApp group with some old high school mates, and it's a number of years ago, and there was conversations about a AFLW player and a photo posted in the group, and so people might know what I'm talking about, but I don't have to name it. And I was so disturbed by it, and I called it out, and I was called all sorts of things for calling it out. You're righteous. You're this. You're that. You've done things with women before that are regrettable and whatever. And of course I have. I'm a guy who's been 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever, and done all sorts of things. But I'm also a man who's trying to work on himself. I'm not a perfect man, but I'm one who believes in growth. And so you hit an age where you go, that's not appropriate. And I called it out, but I ended up having to exit the WhatsApp group because I just couldn't be a part of what it was about. Yeah. A few years later, we've all come back together, and there's a lot of mending, a lot of nostalgic love and history. These are mates that I went to high school with. These are mates I've known all my life. And there's a much deeper respect about what is acceptable. Where's the line and what's above and below the line? There's still guys having banter about stuff, and I don't want it. Evolve doesn't mean for me that you've got to get rid of blokes having banter.
Yeah.
But it means to know where the fucking line is, and to be brave enough to call each other out so that you can go, hey mate, that wasn't cool, and them to go, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. It's brave. It's what you're talking about with allies, as you're alluding to, Josh, and it's not an easy thing to do, is it? Especially, I think the whole there needs to be almost like an education around, do we really understand what prejudice means? What I mean, the simple definition of prejudice, it's something along the lines of forming an opinion without any reason or actual life experience in regards to what you form the opinion on.
Well, conditioning speaks to it. Your conditioning speaks to your prejudice.
Absolutely. And part of it is your upbringing, people you've who who have influenced you on your journey. But when we really ask ourselves, why do we think a certain way, or why would we pass comment a certain way? Do we really know why? You know, I mean, and you've obviously challenged a peer network around, hey, let's have a think about this in a bit of a deeper way. It's not just lazy commentary and throwaway lines. It's just have a think about your behaviour and what you're actually doing. Why is it that way? And I think if we all understand prejudice in a little bit of a deeper way, you know, whether we become apathetic and removed from certain things because you now realise, you know what, I'm a certain way because others have really just rubbed off on me, and now if I move away from that, I'm not so emotional about any of this now. We're all going to, you know, be on our own path and journey with this, but I just think we do continue. We need education. We need awareness around how to actually understand how to influence others and even our own backyard. And I think it all just centres around understanding what prejudice is, when it's evident, how it affects others.
That's the key one, isn't it?
Yeah, how it affects others. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know I said the word conditioning, but your prejudice is there because it's been taught. None of us came out of our mother's wombs with those prejudices. They were taught. They are conditioned into us. And so before I can point the finger at my mates, go, hey, that's not on, I was pointing the finger at myself and going, why have I behaved in certain ways? So it speaks and pulls on your threads of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Actually being self-reflective.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it, because we all have our prejudices, but if you actually are willing to look at yourself and look at them. And admit,
yeah.
which speaks to vulnerability, Hey, Tim Minchin, who's a famous Aussie comedian and composer, I heard him on the BBC recently, and it speaks to this, pulls on the threads of this. He was talking about the gender divide, and he was saying in the USA and Britain and in Australia to a degree, young women are really running to the left and young men are really running towards the right. And it's to do with this toxic masculinity thing. And it's like, rather than doing the work, they're running to figures who will put their arms around them for those prejudiced behaviours and for those toxic behaviours or unevolved behaviours. People like Andrew Tate, who I'm really not a fan of at all. I want to know what sort of conversations do you feel young men, and you're around young men a lot, Bevo, aren't having with each other or having with themselves, most importantly, and what conversations are young men and women not having, all men and women not having with each other? Where are we not hearing or seeing each other?
Yeah. Am I going first here?
Probably for you.
Yeah, okay. Tim Minchin, what a superstar.
Oh, bloody love him.
Yeah.
Did anyone see Matilda?
No.
Cracking. Yeah, cracking. If you ever get to London, go and see Matilda.
Oh, so,
Act 2, Scene 1, bring the Kleenex.
I think it's hard to really, because we're casting it pretty wide on this, you know, and it's difficult. And I can only...
we'll rein it in and we'll get more specific.
well, I think, you know, there's different schools of thought. We need work, we need to be better, but there is a lot of health in this area out there. And I can only maybe talk about my two sons who've got incredible networks of friends, and they're all boys and girls. They're, you know, all genders. And I have never seen any of these prejudices right through all of their relationships. And our two sons, they haven't got a prejudicial bone in their body. And I've never really witnessed it from their friends, from their boyfriends, the lads that they spend time with. And I think it hits this brilliant, colourful sort of high point at some of these festivals where, you know, they celebrate together with music and DJs. And I'm sure there's not a lot of prejudice sometimes in these audiences. Everyone just seems to be in the right space with each other. And I think, so there is some positivity there, but then where the other sort of demons are in society and the education and the bringing people out of their own sort of space that isn't acceptable, I think that's where we kind of feel a bit helpless, because of what we're talking about, the people who have influenced that kind of behaviour. How do you now change it? And I think one of the critical things for me is that not all of those, the men in society have had women in their lives who've loved them, who've had a really positive effect on them. So they don't know what it's like. They don't. The respect for women hasn't originated, or the roots haven't been there in any way, shape, or form. So the challenge is, how do you actually bring that to them? How do you evolve men who think in an extreme way because they don't know the beauty of being close and connected to women? And so obviously I haven't got the answers because it's such a challenging one, but that's the extreme for me. Because I think every man who's had women in their lives who they've loved and have had an unconditional sort of relationship with, they just wouldn't be that way. So I don't know how we get there, but it's a significant consideration.
Yeah, it is a significant consideration. I think what you've spoken to with your lads is it's good parenting, mate. Like if they don't have a prejudice bone in their body, as I said, it's because you didn't offer them a space to have it. So well done, mate.
Well, I'm kind of unique. Dana and I have been together since we were 15.
I know you were saying before.
So they see the way that we get on, we relate. They know that I have a profound and deep respect for my wife, and I don't behave any differently. I'm consistent in that. So they've grown up, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe they're the fortunate ones because they've had that. Yeah.
So on that, when I speaking to how do men and women, how can they see each other better? You guys have clearly endured a lot. It's a 40-year relationship.
Dana's the one who's endured. Yeah. I'm the lucky one. I'm the one who's always batting outside my career, so I keep getting told that.
But how do you speak to each other when you're going through, every relationship goes through arguments. What is your way of going, it's very easy. I've done it many times. I'm here single. Where you don't get it right in an argument, how do you go about ensuring that you do really hear the other person? Because there is that thing in a relationship where you're not listening to me. Yes, I am. You're not listening to me. Yes, I am. What did I just say? You recount everything they just said. Yeah, but you're not listening. Yeah. Because they're not feeling heard. It's not actually about listening, and hearing are two different things. How do you go about, hearing each other?
Yeah, look, I don't want to. I mean, we're probably, I don't know what percentile of society who lasts from their teenage years, but
you're doing something right, mate. So
yeah,
give us the wisdom. Come on.
Well, I think when you're young, it's hard to Kai. It's strange. It's like history repeating itself because Kai has been with Ebony since he was 15. He's 26 now, and we're talking. We swam on the weekend, and it's like. It's probably getting about that time, isn't it? He said, when did you ask Mum, to get married? I said, well, I was 23. We've been together for 8 years. Oh, it's young, Dad. Yeah, it is, mate, but we've been together for 8 years. And I got a full-time job. And so he's 26 and he knows that that's probably where he and Ebony, and look, you don't need a marriage certificate to be together for the rest of your life. And Noah's 24 and he's been with Maggie since he was 15. So it's quite
a little bit of history repeating.
But I think for us though, when you've invested so much in each other, if there is any tension, like it's quite easy. No one catastrophises. It's going to be okay. And this is the thing with relationships in society. People walk away from relationships that could have been beautiful because Well, because you have an argument or you have a fight, and that's the end because you just haven't got that history of investment. And so you've got to go through your trials and tribulations, which we obviously have from time to time. But I can't school anyone on this. I'm probably just lucky. But I think it is part of the understanding for me is my mum is an incredible lady. She's 90 now, and her affection and an unconditional approach to motherhood and what she did for us as kids. Like I could say the worst thing to my mum and it wouldn't be water off a duck's back. It would hurt her deeply, but she would never show it. She would never, ever give me any indication that I was on borrowed time with her. That would never happen. And it cut me deeply, my own behaviour as a young kid and as a teenager when I knew I'd hurt my mum because I knew she didn't deserve it, and I knew that the unconditional approach to motherhood and love was always going to shine through. Now, I'm fortunate. I'm really fortunate that I had that. And that's what I'm saying. I'm the lucky one. Not many people, some of us are fortunate enough to have had that. So it's easier to think in a non-prejudicial way because of our upbringing.
And experienced unconditional love,
yeah.
It's not a phrase that I actually love. I just think the word is love. And real love should come with no conditions. And so just to feel that real love from a mother. But I can't say that, I'm just going to say I don't agree with you. 40 years, you can't be lucky for 15,000 days, mate. That's hard work. That speaks to working at something. And here I am psychologising your relationship. Welcome to the couch, Luke.
So Dana's a lucky one.
Yeah, no, you're both just prepared to endure, which I think is beautiful and it's inspirational. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
We were talking about sort of gender divide. Just coming back to the game, I read the AFLPA report, which is called Insights and Impact, and it showed that 71% of women in the game think that gender equity is the major issue in the game right now, and 4% of men think the same thing, and I was quite shocked by that. So I guess what I want to know is a part of the problem that male players are just not aligned to the spirit of the times, the zeitgeist within the AFLW game and what women value or want in the game? Is there just a sort of systemic disconnect between the codes?
Yeah, well, when I saw that stat as well, that surprised me as well, because potentially it's about the environment that you create, and I can only go on the environment that's created here and observations and even listening to our players is that I feel like that our players are the 29%. So hearing that stat is actually quite alarming, really, if that's the landscape of how players are feeling. But
you guys create a landscape for interconnection, don't you? You do a lot of work.
Not deliberately, do we?
But they train in the same facilities. There's a lot of...
Yeah, it's like a little collegiate environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's quite healthy. It's like a co-ed school. I think everyone
and not every
enjoys
club's doing that.
Well, we're lucky. We've got the facility.
Got the space.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the facility is probably, and falling on my feet, coming into an environment like this 12 months in, and you look out and...
It's unbelievable.
But it's not forced. It's quite organic. And that's probably because we do have that value and respect from our peers. Now, our peers aren't just the female peers, but also, the male peers. And from a professional landscape, I would think that the Bulldogs really encompass that evolved man, so to speak, is that, for me, I've fallen on my feet based on the fact that we've got allies everywhere we look.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's genuine. But
do they hang out socially? Do you see the W players and the men's game players having coffees downstairs or
Yeah,
is there...
I think that the crossover is there because generally we will train after the guys, but the crossover is there. Like you've got your, I'm constantly seeing the guys come through my office, but that's mainly because I've got the lolly jar sitting there. So that's, that's the pull. But yeah, I think, and I was only speaking to Riley Sanders last week, and he even said he finds it really refreshing, because 50% of his friends are female, so to be able to share a work environment, and is really cool, and he actually likes, to have different conversations, So yeah, it's funny is because for me it's the norm, and I think it stems from the leaders as well, is the environment that they create.
So what we're saying is the 71% is everywhere other than the Whitten Oval.
I found that really, But then I've, probably only been privy to such environment in the last 12 months. So,
interesting. Hey, how do you guys feel about the gender pay gap in the game?
Well, again, we're relatively new. So we've only been going 10 seasons, so really 9 years. It's obviously growing because 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been in the position that I'm in now where I'm working full-time in football. So coaching the W, prior to that it was part-time. So it's like anything, time is...
Yeah, so it speaks to the patience game.
So, 2 years ago, we wouldn't have had a female coach full-time.
Yeah,
and now we do. So resources, remuneration is allowing people to be part of that.
It'll grow and grow and grow. Bev, I don't think we can sort of speak to gender equity without speaking to men's mental health. And it's been a really harrowing time in the game of late with Troy Selwood and Adam Hunter sadly passing away, taking their own lives. But it's just, saddens everyone. But we lose one man every 3.5 hours in this country to suicide. One man every 3.5 hours takes his own life. And, I mean, we have a culture in this country that is still, she'll be right, stiff upper lip, no wuckers. I had dinner with an older friend, a guy in his 70s very recently, and I said, how are you? He's like, look, it's been a tough couple of months, but it's all good, it's fine. And I'm like, it's clearly not. You said it's fine about 8 times, and you said it's been a tough couple of months. Speak to that, and you're actually giving someone an opportunity to speak to it and to sort of actually demonstrate how they're feeling is sort of hard for men because of the culture that we're in. And there's a fine line between toughing it up and being resilient and just avoiding or being suppressive. How do you create an environment within the club where young men who are going through stuff, I know this club's gone through stuff, can actually express without feeling judged or being seen as weak or unworthy or whatever?
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier, Josh, that we lean on our resources, whether it's our welfare manager in Brent Prismal or our psych in Andrew, or definitely all our support group through our medical department and high performance. The challenging thing with national codes, international codes, but national codes like the AFL, Aussie rules, it's a team sport, and so if someone is clinically challenged, like they've actually got a diagnosed mental health challenge on their hands, it is something that there's no stigma attached to it. I don't think across the clubs. It is something that we've grappled with over time, because I can be told that Ed Richards has got a slight strain in high up in his left hamstring, and he probably should be right in about 3 weeks. But I won't be told that another player has got a challenge on his hands and he might not be right for 8. Like that just won't happen.
You mean an emotional or mental?
Yeah, like they're in a state, or they're in a state of mind that isn't conducive to even playing the game at any point in time. And so the doctor-patient privilege information still exists with mental health in clubland.
Yep.
But it doesn't exist with physical injury. I get all of that. I know that. So sometimes we feel helpless because we don't necessarily know. And over time, the players have been good in discussions with our psychs, Lisa previously and now Andrew, to say, hey, yeah, I'm okay with you divulging this much information, just so Bevo knows and others know that, yeah, I'm going through a bit of a tough time.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be the detail, it's just so we're aware of it, and then we can help. And this is one of the challenges with the Players Association and the illicit drug code, because I'm not sure if everyone understands that there's two different policies, and one's a voluntary policy and the illicit policy that the AFL Players Association signed up to. They didn't have to. So they submitted all their players, the cohort across the land, to illicit drug tests to monitor illicit drug use across our little niche football industry. Whereas the performance enhancing code is the one governed by ASADA and WADA and that's the one where the heavy penalties come down, etc. If you do take illicit drugs on competition day or even the day before, you're found with those substances in your system on game day, that can still fall under the performance enhancing code. But what the PA have always been is protective of the cohort and the information and so what happens is the 3 strike policy is essentially out the door, because if someone's got a clinically diagnosed issue with mental health, they can have as many strikes as they want taking illicit substances.
Right. But
you can't help them because you don't know. And so that's across the industry. I'm not talking about our club. Like, that's just the way it is. So that when the PA get protective because they're paranoid that in clubland we're going to do the wrong thing by a player, well, it's the wrong train of thought. We're all here to help and support. And so I think the resources, and this is what happened, during the cuts to the soft cap, we came out of that. And even with the review of our footy department, we were, in the lowest percentile in the competition for committing resources to that space with, a playing list of, 43 or 44 players. So we had to bolster it really, really quickly. We'd let ourselves down.
Do you have players who come to you, or they come to Praddy or to Brendan Lade and just express how they're feeling? Or is it always through the system of going through the psych? Do they go man to man, brother to brother type thing? Is there that environment?
Yeah, I think on a level, but it's not in a deep, Because
they're dealing with, there's 45 guys who are dealing with a lot of pressures, a lot of expectations, a lot of scrutiny, a lot of it's bloody tough. Would you like that? Would you like to have some of those guys? I mean, you don't have to carry everything, but would you like to have someone come up to you, if Marcus came up to you and just said, I'm actually really struggling at the moment.
Yeah.
Bev, would you like, or would you prefer it to go through a psych and then come to you?
I think I'd prefer what they feel is more comfortable for them.
Yeah, whatever they need.
Yeah. And that's where, by and large, they'll have those conversations with, our resources who are probably more qualified to deal with it. And we can only be there, almost like father figures and big brothers and, a shoulder to lean on. We haven't got the answers. We haven't got the pathway out of some of these struggles at times. And so that's where we need to lean on the resources like the players do ourselves.
On that, you guys go through the rigors of this, and it's, Bebe, you've copped more than most on your journey. And I'm always, there on a screen or with the paper just going, no, Don't talk about him like that. What are your go-to mental health strategies? What are your sort of non-negotiables to keep you feeling on top of life and self?
Well, I've got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, so that offers
There
a
you go.
fair bit of perspective when you get home. So
Wine is my...
red wine. In moderation. For me, it's being able to, and it's probably something that I'm constantly working on, is being able to separate. So be present when you're here at football, but then when you're at home, being present there. But also you've got your confidants and your mentors and things like that you can offload to. But yeah, mine's probably having, a strong family and support network. But also being able to switch off, with a 6 and a 2-year-old, it's, irrelevant. The stuff that you're dealing with, probably we were speaking about this again today. I think that, I had 1 week of scrutiny, media scrutiny, and I don't know how Bevo does it, is that, what have you had ongoing for how long? Since probably 2016?
Yeah.
You had a couple more than 1 week, I reckon.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that, within the 4 walls, if you're, feeling supported and things like that, I think it's harder for those, our partners. My wife, I know that she probably took it worse than I did because she didn't sign up for the external commentary.
And I've had conversations with Dana and I know she takes it pretty tough.
But yeah, it's still a work in progress. Yeah.
Bev, strategies, little things that people might be able to take away as well from what an AFL coach does to stay mentally sound in check.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, you've got to try and keep your head in the right space and away from the noise. I mean, I think one of the things that all the senior coaches don't do is check in on each other, because we know when someone checks in on us, they've read something or they've heard something, and where we're trying to be not oblivious to it, but make sure that we can only we focus on the things that we can control and influence. And one of the things, the simple thing that influences, the narrative is really just winning games of football. It's quite simple. And we all appreciate that and take that on board as our mandate to try and do it as often as possible. But my approach is a really sort of affirmative model is physical activity.
Yeah.
Stay active, be as physically fit as you can. Make sure the endorphins are flowing. You're satisfied that you're putting yourself out there in an extreme way as far as your life challenges and your risk taking, and you feel invigorated by your own journey and presence and what you're doing. And because it's that healthy body, healthy mind aspect of building up resilience, and Tam and I were talking about, like a big oak tree, the rings of depth and thickness. As the tree grows tall, it grows wide, and the longer you're in it, the more resilient you become, the more not removed, but the more I suppose capable of dealing with scrutiny you become. And you've been through trials and tribulations. You've got the utmost faith and belief in yourself and others around you that you know you're going to come out of it. And it's probably for the first time last year where, in the early parts of the 2024 season, Josh, and I don't know when you did talk to Dana about this, but she was emotional for the first time in my journey. It was really, she wasn't managing it well.
Because they were coming for you. It's like they had a personal vendetta. It's like, how can we take this guy down? That's how I felt. It felt personal.
Yeah, and I spent a good period of time thinking, is what I'm doing now affecting my wife's physical health? Because she's so drained and caught up in the negativity, which I'm trying to, not escape from, but steer clear of, so I can get what I need to get done. And I seriously, that's when you start to question your coaching mortality, because it might seem right for you at the time, but it's definitely not right for someone else in your life, because it's actually having a bad effect.
I'm glad that even comes into consideration, that that's how I think it speaks to you, but and I feel like a lot of people out there aren't thinking, when you were going through that, one, I don't think they're thinking about how you're feeling. A lot of people are going, yeah, I can take him down because we love watching someone, we love a tall poppy getting chopped. But are they ever thinking about, I wonder how his wife is with this?
Yeah, and I think, this is the thing about the choices we make with what we do and how you do it, because you can choose to be working as in an industry, you can choose to be a certain type of practitioner. But then there's choices at the micro level of what you do is how you do it. And whether it is a football coach like us or extremely talented artists like yourself, how you go about it, or from a journalistic license point of view, how you present and who you want to be perceived as. Everyone's making choices. So I think what I've been able to do is compartmentalise the fact that there's positives and negatives always in the narratives depending on how well you're going, and most will be quite measured either way. And it's only the few who aren't. That you got to make sure that you put them in a little box and you just ignore it as much as you can, even though others might be affected by it.
I know that our Western Bulldogs Community Foundation, Sons of the West and Daughters of the West programs speak to this, to things around mental health, physical health, nutrition. I think they're wonderful programs, but it's great when our leaders are sort of taking part in some of those activities just naturally that we're teaching in those programs. Hey, I've got a few quick fire final questions, guys. If you could choose one male advocate from either inside or outside of the game to promote AFLW, who would it be?
Ooh, one.
Just one. Well, no. I'm choosing Tony Armstrong.
Oh, good one. Yeah. I'm pretty lucky that I've got, multiple inside here.
You only get one.
Brendan Lade.
Brendan Lade, good.
Yeah.
Bev?
I'll choose one, but I'll mention another.
So you'll choose two?
Nah, well, it's the reigning premiership coach of the Kangaroos in Darren Crocker.
Yep.
I think because Darren, 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. I think for credibility, it's good that the male representative and coach has daughters, so he kind of gets it a bit. Yep. And the other one's Craig Starcevich, who's a bit stiff because he's been a very successful coach, and I'm pretty sure he's got one of each. I was trying to do my research, couldn't find his daughter anywhere, but I think he's got a daughter.
Okay.
So he misses out if he hasn't. But probably at this point in time, Darren Crocker.
Darren Crocker. One simple thing grassroots footy can do to help connect their male and women cohorts based on what you guys might do here. One little thing. Simple. I'm going to go with train together. Have a night where you train together.
Yeah.
I'll go, this might be a bit controversial, but I go the opposite way. Because I don't really think that the boys and girls want to train together.
No, I'm with you on that too.
Yeah. I just think we need to be organised. And the hardest thing at junior level or
I'm sort of calling it as like a fun day. You maybe train together and have a barbecue.
Which we had.
Yeah, which we do.
Yeah.
But we probably didn't need to have, really, did we?
Well,
because it's almost natural anyway.
Yeah. But I think they've got to be organised because they're competing for spaces on ground. I'm talking about greenfields. Like maybe in regional centres, there's not enough teams for the grounds. I don't know, but here, like the constraints around fitting boys and girls teams, training, playing, you've got to be organised. So there's no tension around who's using what and when, and so that's a significant thing. That's what I'd say, because I think quite organically the social connection can happen. On selection nights and things like that. So that for me is the important coming together back at the club in a social sense, not necessarily on the field.
Okay. Final question. you're 6 years old, you're kicking a footy to yourself in one of these green spaces, and your current self walks up to your child self. What's the one piece of advice you'd give that 6-year-old self?
It's a long time ago. I was kicking a footy when I was 6 and 8.
I'm sure you were.
In a Bulldogs t-shirt, actually. I would probably say hang in there. There's going to be girls' change rooms attached to a football club soon.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, I'd probably, because I've talked about myself in a fortunate way tonight around the prejudices that I don't have. I've got to come away from the subject matter and just say, I'd say to myself, use your left foot a little bit more, Luke.
Love it. Tam, Bevo, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, really insightful conversation around gender equity and allyship from men in our beloved game. It's been wonderful to have you on the Behind the Mask podcast.
Thanks for having us, Josh. Thanks, Tam. Well done.
Thanks, Bevo.